question that came to mind as you were speaking, and particularly from a growth perspective, is cookie policies.
Right. Yeah.
Which, was something that we spent a lot of time thinking about at Ben and in general. How do you think, this might be too tough of a question,
Right.
but how do you think a company should structure its cookie policy to, collect the maximum amount of data, but also stay compliant?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, like you said, we spent a lot of time going into this, and it is just like you could spend forever on this basically. And the worst part about it is it's like the least policed law in history or something like that. Like, I don't think anyone's ever been convicted of not having a cookie policy. There's basically no way of like tracking it, this, that, and the other. So a lot of people, I'm not saying you should do this, just don't have one, and like they go on with their life and nothing really comes of it.
After a brief camera malfunction, back in the room, speaking about cookie policies,
right,
which Jimmy described as the least policed policy.
Yeah, the least policed law in history, I think.
Cool.
I mean, you can fact check me on that, but like, I basically think like no one ever has ever really been caught up in it. Doesn't mean you shouldn't like abide by it, because I mean it was put in place for a reason, which is obviously like people's data is like precious, right? But yeah, it can be a bit of a minefield. Like, you can go about it a few different ways. Some ways technically aren't legal, but still like kind of imply that you have a policy. You just have a pop-up, it's like, we do cookies, and then you can get rid of it. And then you can go further down that route, which is like having people be able to select what data you're allowed to collect from them and whatnot. And that obviously gets more complicated in development as well, and is a bit more of a time suck, but still works. Yeah, it's like very legally abiding or whatever.
Makes sense. Yeah, I think a lot of people would be surprised how many of those cookie pop-ups on websites don't do anything.
Yeah,
because the website itself is just not compliant. They're collecting your data anyway. But on the other hand, for companies that, particularly in B2B, where there are strict certifications or third-party verification that they have to go through, for example, ISO and things like that at Ben, it is very important for them to get it right. And there's quite a lot of work that goes into getting those right.
Yeah, I mean, it can even come into sales as well. Because I remember a security guy at a company I worked for basically telling me that a lot of like they don't really like care what it does, but it's, say for example, a company's looking at buying Ben and they have strict security policies themselves. A quick check for them, especially if we're a startup and they kind of want to be like, oh, like fact check these people. A quick check for them will just be to come to your website and see like what's your cookie policy and like what's your pop-up do, and maybe check if it works. Like, that's just a quick check for them to be like, okay, are these guys abiding by laws and security? So it can even help like in sales and stuff like that, because you could just be quickly crossed out of conversations if you don't have it.
Yeah, that's a big thing. It's not policed until the moment that you get caught out, and then it's absolutely devastating.